Well, for this one, I was originally going to talk about Mummy the Resurrection. However, it occurs to me that I don't really sure if I have much to say philosophically about what Mummy the Resurrection is all about. The thick, developed version of Mummy didn't come out till towards the end of the original run of the OG World of Darkness. For a long time, it had been a much smaller World of Darkness book, basically a minor little appendix to the vampire setting, where there's only a handful of mummies left over from ancient Egypt that were left on the world. And, I want to say there's like maybe only 50 of them tops, planet-wide. This kind of resets them and fleshes them out greatly. However, it's in and of itself, though, it's actually not a complete book. It does not have the basic rules or any of that kind of stuff with it. It's almost kind of like an unaware prototype of what the Chronicle of Darkness books were to be a few years later. It's not that it's bad. I need to give it a better reread before I try to speak on that one. So we'll speak about the resurrection in a few days. The only thing I've really come up with off the top of my head this morning is I guess maybe you can make an analogy to born-again Christians. So yeah, I want to put a little bit more thought into that one. So in the meantime, we're going to talk, I guess, about Kindred of the East. It's another book that's a kind of attachment to Vampire the Masquerade. It's not a standalone game. It presents an entirely alternative type of vampire. A type of vampire that in some ways, while perhaps being a little bit more complicated in its overall character design, I kind of like them in concept. They are not forcibly turned into creatures of darkness. This is very much their decision. There is no such thing as a Eastern vampire that was made into a vampire against its will. This is all their own choice, because in many ways this is actually kind of like a strange variant on the Risen source book for Wraith the Oblivion, which was about ghosts managing to re-inhabit bodies and make zombies and stuff. These are a bit more powerful. These are people who've crawled out of hell, so on that angle, they're already bad folks, so already kind of destined to evil. How you want to interpret the fact that these are people who've defied the karmic wheel to come back to life and avoid their punishment and instead become something of demons themselves to mortals. Most of these vampires, they will feed on blood, but it's not exclusively blood, because what they're really feeding on is the underlying yin or yang energy. I guess some of the real, quote-unquote, problems with White Wolf's World of Darkness and how it unfurled its year of the Lotus with all the Eastern variants of its games is that it really reinforces the idea that Far Eastern culture is otherized to a degree that no other, group on Earth is otherized from each other. The overall World of Darkness setting, certain kinds of shapeshifters or certain bloodlines of vampires and so on might be associated with a particular region of the planet or a particular, culture or civilizational arc. In some places, you're not naturally going to find a lot of werewolves in South America living there native to South America, because there's only one species of wolf. It's not even a pack type wolf that lives down there. And so on and so forth. You're not going to see a whole lot of werecats in Europe because there's no big cats left in Europe, not for thousands of years, all that kind of thing. Vampire clans like the Assamites are clearly out of the ancient Iraq and stuff like that, or Arabia, whereas the Toreador clearly have a kind of a French European aristocrat type design to them. But even then, though, despite the fact that there was various things within the World of Darkness that were distinct to various ethnicities or regions or cultures, there was still a universality about it all, where they all still basically it's just a Native American version of something that was going on somewhere else. It's just an African version of something that was going on somewhere else. It's just a Central Asian version of something that was going on somewhere else. It's just a European version of something that's been going on somewhere else. And then you get to the Far East, which by Far East, like, let's be, like, I guess, more clear about the context, because we tend not to really, I mean, Far East is so vague. I mean, from what point on the globe are we even talking East? And all that kind of stuff. We're mostly talking about Mongolia, China, Korea, the Japan Islands, a few Himalayan countries like Nepal, Tibet, ostensibly part of China, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and segments of the Indonesian and Malaysian islands. That's generally what we mean when we're talking about Far Easterners. Once upon a time, a lot of people would just say Chinese, but obviously not all those countries are part of China. And also, in a way, China isn't part of China because they don't call it that there. That's all a digression. For some reason, in the world of darkness, there's just a distinct radical shift in how everything works there. The spirit world is different. There's all these additional qualities that the various supernatural factions there have to deal with in regards to like the balance between yin and yang forces, and the kind of the universalizing a lot of how they describe their various types of magic energy down to it all just being chi and stuff like that. Their spirit world is kind of somehow bubbled off from the rest of the spirit world and acts different. Although when you really, I think part of the problem is that it's couched in the cultural idea that the East is other, and insofar that the world of darkness is a fictionalized version of our world, where humanity is a bit at its worst, then I'm not really sure. Like, is it the writers just kind of being bluntly dumb about how they're deciding to kind of like treat East Asian culture as being something that's like wholly divorced and almost alien from how the rest of the world thinks and operates? Or is that a subtly brilliant depiction of how like our own culture has treated them anyway? Like, I think most of the quote-unquote problem with this whole East-West divide just really comes down to like the two language families are fairly fucking different. And so that creates this kind of illusion that, somehow like Chinese or Thai or whatever culture is so arcane in comparison to like, our own and all that kind of stuff. But, I feel like if you were to like sandblast both cultures down to their core elements, you still are basically having the same values and the same beliefs. They're just naming things different. But the Kuei Jin aren't just, so like, why weren't they done like the Ebony Kingdom? Why weren't they just other clans of kindred vampires? Instead, they're this entirely unique other kind of vampire that only seems to arise from population areas that have a lot of humans of those particular nationalities that I mentioned just a minute ago. That is a little weird, perhaps possibly in the context of the greater game, where like anyone on Earth could decide to be bonded with a fucking mummy spirit, even though they're all from ancient Egypt, but they don't just exclusively bond themselves to Egyptians. And while various vampire clans might have their origins in one particular country or nationality, as they've spread across the world, there's nothing stopping them from embracing and turning anybody of any origin into a vampire of their type. Same thing with the African legacies, which are just what they call the clans. They function the same, so they're still basically just, it's a traceable bloodline from an ancient vampire that's had a stamp on how their descendants operate in terms of what kind of weird flaws they might have and what kind of disciplines they specialize. It's a common, axis upon which a faction can be built. So it really doesn't matter what it's called. Werewolves arguably are maybe a bit more tied to their tribe's ethnic regional origins, but that's also been blurred. Kinfolk can mate with anybody, just like humans can, mate with anyone they want, and therefore, like, that bloodline can suddenly, you might be descended from Russian silver fangs, but, if a couple generations decide to, like, breed into people of a Caribbean origin, suddenly you have a Jamaican silver fang after a few generations, kind of a thing. Yet for some reason, only East Asians, for the most part, get to be Kuei Jin. And so, yeah, that's a little weird. Why otherize it that much? And as I say, is that supposed to be kind of a statement of the world of darkness being a statement on our world, or is that just kind of like just, there's people just doing the standard thing? I've got to write a book about, China and Japanese vampires. Oh my God! Well, I guess just throwing all the classic things that people are going to be expecting in it, like like the fruity paint job and the pagoda kind of styling, the American Chinese menu font they use for stuff. I wish they could have just presented an alternate vampire that's maybe a bit more universalized. They maybe regretted it because by the time you get to San Francisco by Night, it does start talking about things that apparently here and there a few non-East Asians have started to also come back as Kuei Jin, but coincidentally only in areas where there's a bunch of Asians in Kuei Jin. Maybe it's something tied with it's a paradigm issue, kind of like with Mage, and it's just people who are Buddhist or Confucianist, Taoist, or Zen, Shinto. Just for some reason, when they die and go to hell through that particular paradigm of belief, they get this option to crawl back out because of how the Yama Kings operate in the Thousand Hells. I don't know. The Hengeokai for Werewolf the Apocalypse, I feel are a lot better. In many ways, the Hengeokai, their spirit world is they relabel things a bit differently, but it's pretty much the identical. It's just different language, different names. Duh. The significant thing is that their Hengeokai is the collective whole of all the different kinds of shapeshifters. For some reason, here in the Far East, the War of Rage didn't occur, and the various types of shapeshifters still get along with each other. And, it actually does the thing that, the vampire game didn't, where, it's not like you have just a completely, totally new set of shapeshifters. Many of them, like the Khan or the Shadow Lord Haken, have already, they're already part of the setting. It's just another part of the world. They just dressed up a little differently, which, like I said, arguably you can kind of say maybe Kenja of the East should have been more of, or it wouldn't quite have seen so much like it leans into the idea of Asian as alien. Which is also, okay. I guess, like I said, the Hengeokai, I feel like they kind of show an alternative of what the werewolf setting would have been if the werewolves hadn't murdered all the other shapeshifters in ancient times. Not a whole lot else to say about it though, compared to the difference, because they're still the same changing breeds. They still operate the same. So most of what I've said about Werewolf the Apocalypse still basically applies to Hengeokai, except that they believe that there's more beyond the age of the apocalypse, that the age of the sixth age is not actually the end, it's just the worst part, but then things will start to get better afterwards. The Kuei Jin, viewed in the context of the standard stereotypical beliefs held about East Asian civilization. And I'm going to say overall that perhaps this game I wouldn't say is racist as so far as it is civilizationist. The common held view, and there might be some truth to it to some degree or not, but how much people kind of fetishize it and kind of think of it in some sort of blanket totality as opposed to what's really going on. Well, isn't that the case with a lot of things? Anyway, the idea that East Asians, compared to other, major human populations, are more collectivist in attitude. And we're not just talking about, like modern Communist Party in China or anything like that. Just the notion that the family name is put first, and that the person's family ranks above their own individual life, kind of thinking. Which also is itself not actually alien to other cultures either. So as I say, I feel in some ways we kind of in a strange way fetishize that notion about East Asian. But anyway, based out of the context that there's that kind of view about what Asian culture is like, where everyone's supposed to know their place, they're supposed to fulfill their role, they're supposed to bring honor, to their family and to their name and all that kind of stuff. They're supposed to adhere to their dharma in order to be able to find their karma, kind of a thing. The Kuei Jin, within that setting, are actually, whereas, Western vampires are kind of like a statement about politicians and, people with a lot of political power and wealth, this is like a statement about hard identity, like hardcore individuality, in the face of mass conformity. These are people who have to, in the context of being part of this culture where everything's supposed to be perfectly ordered out and everyone's supposed to adhere to their duties as handed down by tradition and what their social rank is supposed to imply. The Kuei Jin are like, fuck that. They're defying their appointed fate. They did bad, they went to hell, and they're like, fuck you, I'm going back. And they actually pull it off. They didn't, need some holy man to come down and bargain to take 40 of them out of there or anything. Like, they've done this entirely under their own power. And so, I guess you can pull some sort of thinking out of Kindred of the East about, the nature of the individual and the importance of self-determination. And whether or not is that saying that defying your place and forcing your own self-determination in the face of the inevitable conclusion of your actions causes damage and makes you into a monster, perhaps. Makes you into something that has to feed on someone. I don't know. Kindred of the East is kind of a tangled mess. Draw your own conclusions. Those are a few thoughts. Like I said, originally I was going to do Mummy, but after kind of thinking about it, it's actually I feel like I need to give the book a quick reread so I can actually come up with something better than how ancient Egyptian mummies are like born-again Christians. No, that's not the angle. So I wanted to still at least get something out. So congratulations, my half-ass The Otherizing of the East video for Philosophies of Darkness. Hit like and subscribe, leave comments, and do all the things. Stay waspinated.